Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to tackle one of the biggest ideas there is, something that has fascinated, comforted, and, challenged humanity for thousands of years. We're going to dive into two really profound answers to a universal question by looking at reincarnation and rebirth.
What happens when we die? I mean, seriously. Is there some eternal part of us, a soul, that continues on a grand journey? Or is it something else entirely? A process, maybe. A continuation of energy, but without a persistent you at the center of it all. Well, we're going to dig deep into Eastern philosophy to really understand two hugely influential and, as you'll see, very different ideas about what comes next.
Okay, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll look at the Hindu concept of a soul's endless journey. Then we'll flip the script and check out the Buddhist view of rebirth as a process, not a person. After that, we'll zoom in on the great divide between them, which all comes down to the idea of the self. Then we'll get into the really cool stuff, the how, the transition between lives. And finally, we'll explore why, in both traditions, the ultimate goal is actually to get off the merry-go-round altogether.
So, first up, let's journey into the rich world of Hindu thought. In this view, the story of what happens after we die is one of reincarnation. We're talking about the journey of an immortal individual soul.
Now, the star of this cosmic show is something called the Atman. You can think of it as your truest self, an eternal spark of the divine that never, ever changes. It's the core of your being that goes on long after your body is gone, life after life after life. It's not just a part of you. In this view, it is the real you. And here is a fantastic way to picture the relationship between that soul, the Atman, and your body. The body is temporary. It's like a set of clothes that the soul wears for a little while. And when those clothes get worn out, at death, the soul just takes them off and moves on to a new outfit. So the Atman, the real you, is this constant traveler, and our lives are just different stops on its very, very long journey. And this journey, it happens inside a giant cycle called samsara, a cycle that has no beginning and, for most people, no end. Now, the engine that keeps this whole thing spinning is karma. And this isn't just what goes around comes around. It's more like a law of nature. Every single action, word, and even thought leaves a kind of imprint. Good actions, called punya, lead to a better situation in your next life. Harmful actions, or papa, lead to, less fortunate ones. And the whole thing is guided by your dharma, your specific duties and responsibilities in life which help you create that good karma.
So here's the twist. The real point isn't just to keep leveling up to better and better lives forever. The ultimate goal is actually to get off the wheel entirely. This is called moksha, liberation. It's that moment when the individual soul, the Atman, finally realizes it was never separate from the ultimate reality, from Brahman, in the first place. It's a state of merging, of final peace, finally free from the endless cycle of being born again.
All right, now let's switch gears and look at Buddhism, because it paints a totally different picture. Now, Buddhism also came out of India, and it shares ideas like samsara and karma, but it takes a hard left turn on the biggest question of all: who or what is actually being reborn?
And this is where things get really, really interesting. This is the doctrine of anatta, or non-self. Basically, Buddhism looks at our experience of life and says, you know what? There's no permanent, unchanging Atman to be found anywhere. Instead, what we call a self is just an ever-changing process, a combination of physical parts, feelings, thoughts, and consciousness. It's a process, not a solid thing. And that, right there, completely changes the game when it comes to what happens after death.
So, you've got to be asking, right? If there's no soul, no thing to travel from one body to the next, how in the world can there be rebirth? Well, the answer is causality. It's not a substance that gets transferred, it's a process that continues. The consciousness of one life, shaped by all its karma, becomes the direct cause for a new consciousness to spring up in the next life.
And this is just the perfect way to understand it. Imagine you light a new candle with an old one. Is the flame on that second candle the exact same flame? No, of course not. But it's not totally different either, right? It only exists because of the first flame. And that is how Buddhist rebirth works. It's a continuity, a transfer of energy and cause and effect, not the journey of a fixed identity.
The fancy term for this whole causal chain is dependent origination. It's basically a series of links where one thing leads to the next. It all starts with ignorance, like fundamentally misunderstanding reality by believing in a permanent self.
That ignorance makes us create karmic patterns, which are like seeds. Those seeds give rise to a new stream of consciousness at the moment of conception. That consciousness then helps create a new mind and body, which leads to a new birth, which of course leads to aging and death, starting the whole process over again. It's just a seamless flow of cause and effect.
Okay, so we've laid out the two basic views. Now let's put them right next to each other to really see where they split. And believe me, it is a dramatic split.
This chart just nails the core difference. Hinduism gives us a traveler, the Atman, on a very long trip. Buddhism, on the other hand, describes the trip itself continuing, but with no permanent traveler. In Hinduism, the thing that connects one life to the next is the soul. In Buddhism, it's that causal stream of consciousness, and that means they have totally different end goals. For Hinduism, it's about the soul finally merging back with God. For Buddhism, it's about putting out the fire of craving and ignorance that keeps the process going in the first place.
So, what is actually supposed to be happening in that mysterious time between death and the next life? Well, a lot of traditions talk about it, but Tibetan Buddhism gives us one of the most detailed and frankly fascinating roadmaps of this whole transition.
This in-between phase is called the bardo. Think of it as an intermediate state. It's the gap, the space between the end of one life and the beginning of the next. And it's not just some cosmic waiting room, it's a really dynamic, powerful, and often pretty confusing time for that stream of consciousness.
So in the bardo, consciousness is said to have this subtle mental body with all its senses, and even extra abilities like clairvoyance. It can zip around instantly just by thinking of a place. But it's not total freedom. The consciousness is basically blown around by the winds of its past karma. It sees all sorts of visions and gets pulled irresistibly towards a rebirth that just fits its karmic patterns, all its deep-seated habits, desires, and fears.
According to texts like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this bardo state can last for up to 49 days. Now, a being might find a place for rebirth almost instantly, or it could drift in this state for a while until a suitable situation, like a womb, is found. It's good to remember, though, that this number is often seen as symbolic, representing a complete cycle of possibility, not necessarily a literal stopwatch. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. What's the point of all this? We've been talking about these huge cosmic cycles, but in both Hinduism and Buddhism, the goal is not to stay on the ride forever. The goal is to get off.
So let's look at the ultimate goals side by side again, moksha and nirvana. They both mean freedom, but they reflect their core beliefs perfectly. Moksha is about addition, about union, the individual soul merging back into the vast ocean of the divine. Nirvana, which literally means to extinguish, is all about subtraction. It's about blowing out the flames of greed, hatred, and ignorance that cause all the suffering and keep the cycle going. One is about realizing your true eternal self, the other is about realizing there was never a permanent self to begin with.
And here's something that is so crucial to get. Traditionally, both of these ideas, reincarnation and rebirth, they weren't seen as a comfort, they were seen as a problem. This endless cycle of being born, getting sick, growing old and dying over and over, driven by karma and confusion, that's fundamentally a state of dukkha, a deep kind of suffering or unsatisfactoriness. The entire spiritual path was basically designed as an escape plan.
But it's funny. Today, especially in the West, these ideas have kind of been flipped upside down. The idea of coming back again and again is often seen as a really comforting thought, a way to cheat death, a belief that our story doesn't really end. It's become this psychological tool we use to feel better about our fear of not existing. And that is a huge, huge shift from what it originally meant.
And that leaves us with one last, big idea to chew on. Depending on how you look at it, as the journey of a soul or the continuation of a process, is the idea of living again and again a comforting promise of immortality? Or is it a kind of cosmic prison that only wisdom can unlock? The answer to that doesn't just shape what we think happens when we die, it shapes how we decide to live, right here and right now.